Welcome, everyone. My name is Neil Popish. I am the program director with the Jewish Community Center, a division of Jewish Nevada. I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's Las Vegas Jewish Film Festival webinar. And happy 7th night of Hanukkah to each of you who are celebrating. Special thanks to the Robinson and Frankoff families for their sponsorship and dedication to Jewish film. We also hope that you can join us Christmas Eve for a double feature at the West Winds Drive-In Movie Theater for the animated classic An American Tale and the documentary Dreaming of a Jewish Christmas. If you're interested, please just email Neil and he will make sure he sends you all the information. I also want to thank Joshua Abbey and the Las Vegas Jewish Film Festival for this partnership. For those of you who don't know, this is our 10th film we have done over the past 9 months. Also need to make a big thank you to the Las Vegas Review Journal and all of our sponsors and producers. We hope that you've enjoyed our series of films and webinars. You could always visit the Las Vegas Jewish Film Festival website at www.lvjff.org for updates and links to our past webinars. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to watch tomorrow on the Jewish Nevada YouTube page. Once our Q&A with our panelists is finished, I will then ask questions from you, our participants. If you have a question for any of our panelists, please use the Q&A button located on the bottom of your screen. We will ask as many questions as we can in the time allotted. I'd like to welcome our esteemed panelists for today's webinar. First, we have Lynn Roth, producer, writer and director of Shepherd, the Story of a Jewish Dog, who is also the filmmaker for The Little Traitor and others. I also want to welcome August Maturo, who is the actor and the star of Shepherd, the Story of a Jewish Dog, who was also the star of the Disney Channel show Girl Meets World. So welcome. Also welcome us, as always, is Las Vegas Jewish Film Festival director, Joshua Abbey. Joshua, it's off to you.
Thank you, Neil. Good evening, everyone. Very, very happy Hanukkah. I hope you've had a chance to light your candles before tuning in with us as the sun sets early this time of year. And we are very excited to have extraordinary guests this evening, Lynn and Augie, which is short for August, who are going to share a lot of very special information about their experience creating this magical film, Shepherd, the Story of a Jewish Dog. We had a tremendous response and participation for this particular film, and we're grateful, especially to Lynn, for conceiving it and producing it and going through the labor of giving it birth, which I'm sure was quite an extraordinary ordeal, especially working with animals and children. No slight intended to you, Augie, because I know you're a seasoned actor and must have been a joy to work with. But let's start with Augie. I want to get your thoughts, what your first impressions were when you read the screenplay of Shepherd.
When I was first reading the script, by the end, I was full of tears. I was crying. I fell in love with the character Joshua, and I immediately wanted to play him. And I ran to my mom and I was like, "Mom, I have to be Joshua." And this is my first movie, so I was really excited, and yeah.
That's interesting, because my mom told me I had to be Joshua. What did you know about the Holocaust before you began working on the film?
I was only 9, so I didn't know anything. So whenever I first got the script, my mom explained the Holocaust to me, in a very gentle way. So it's not like, traumatizing or anything. It's, so I didn't know much, but I would study, and I would watch movies, and I would read books, and I read books like The Boy in the Striped Pajamas and The Hiding Place, and I learned all about it before I worked on the film.
Lynn, did you intend the film to be for younger audiences? to learn about the Holocaust, and how did you evaluate the best way to achieve that, if that was one of your goals?
Yes, it was one of my goals, and I just love what Augie just said when he said it was done in a gentle way and not traumatizing. That's great, Augs, but that was how I wanted to approach the material. I mean, obviously I couldn't make it benign. It had to be true to what happened, but I had to pull down on the horrors. To make it palatable to people Augie's age, it had to be adjusted. So when they're older, they can find out some of the more horrible details of the Holocaust. But as an introduction, I had to do it this way.
Well, much credit goes to your attempting to achieve that, because that is a very underserved area. The first orientation, making young people aware, and it's a very difficult challenge. And I think it's remarkable how well you were successful in that regard.
Thank you, Joshua. Thank you. Two
Tell us-
Joshuas. I have two Joshuas here.
Yes, Joshua. So tell us about the novel a little bit that the story comes from, the Israeli novel, and what the adaptation process was like.
The novel was called Hakelev HaYehudi, which in Hebrew means a Jewish dog. And I first heard about the novel when it was being written. I was teaching a class in Israel at the time, and a friend of the novelist, Asher Kravitz, pitched the idea to the class and to me. We were learning how to pitch. And when I heard this idea, I said, oh my God, I can never leave this story. I have to do something with the story. And I waited for the novel to be written, and I optioned it, and I optioned it again, and I optioned it again. And the novel was quite different than the movie. It's all narrated by the dog. At the time, it was written just in Hebrew. It's subsequently been translated into English, but it was narrated by the dog. And I realized that most dog movies are narrated by a dog, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted us to invest ourselves in what that dog was thinking and feeling. Much more the approach like Lassie. I grew up on Lassie, and I remember being so involved in those stories, and that's the way I wanted to tell Shepherd, is without the dog explaining to us, just the dog showing us its feelings.
Tell us about your first encounter with, I know there were multiple dogs used in the making of the film, but Augie, had you ever worked with animals before, and what was that experience like for you?
So my mom was actually very concerned because I didn't have a dog when I was first cast as Joshua. So she was thinking of getting a dog for me, but like as she was looking in the shelter for a dog online, my uncle just came and knocked at the door like, oh, we can't take this dog and we need somebody to take the dog. And my mom was like, whose dog is this? I want the dog. And it was like,
but it was a German Shepherd. It was a German Shepherd.
She's a German Shepherd, purebred German Shepherd. And her name is Sailor. And she's like the best dog you could ever have. And she's so cute. And I would play with her all the time. And that's how I would get used to dogs, because before I was so scared of dogs, I could not get near them. But after Sailor, I was able to, you know, be with the dogs on set, and I love them all so much.
What else did you do to prepare for such a difficult role? I mean, such a serious part, you know, with so many different relationships with the other characters, and you know, the drama and trauma of being separated from your parents and everything, your whole world turned upside down. How did you prepare for that?
I wouldn't be able to have expressed those feelings if I didn't study the Holocaust, you know, because as I said before, I wasn't taught in school anything about the Holocaust, so I didn't know anything. So as I said before, I would read books and watch movies like Diary of Anne Frank, and all these books and movies are like through the eyes of the character going through the Holocaust, and I would understand, and I'd be like, wow, this Holocaust is like terrible, like terrible. And as I was acting in the movie, I would just channel that, and I would channel the terrors that people would go through. It's terrible. It's crazy what people.
Yeah, I mean, I think the maturity that you brought to that role, and the arc of the character from the innocence to the, you know, shocking loss of innocence, and you were rising to the occasion to cope in, I mean, it was so believable. You just did an extraordinary performance.
Thank you.
What did your friends think of the movie when it was released and people you knew your age saw it? Did they have a reaction?
They didn't know much about the Holocaust either, surprisingly. And when they watched it, they thought the movie was beautiful and like one of the best things I've ever done. And they loved it so much, and they knew how the Holocaust was terrible, and they learned more about it, because before the movie they didn't know anything. And they all thought it was great, and I have to thank Lynn for that, because she made the movie amazing with the writing and everything.
Thank you.
Lynn, tell us about casting Augie and casting the role of Joshua.
Well, I certainly didn't make a mistake, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I auditioned lots of boys his age at the time, and they would come to my house with their mothers because I had dogs. I had 2 dogs at the time, and it was very important to me to see the actor near dogs, just for the reasons that Augie explained before. If the actor was afraid of dogs or not comfortable, it would have taken twice as long to film the movie. So I wanted to see how they interacted with the dogs. And actually, Augie's admitting now that he was afraid of dogs at the time, but he faked it very well. He let those dogs jump all over him and nip at his ankles. And he convinced me that he could do it. Once we were in Hungary, the way he bonded with those animals was remarkable, absolutely remarkable. They loved him and he loved them.
So what were the biggest challenges during the production? What didn't you expect to happen that really threw you for a loop?
Almost everything. As you said before, the cardinal rule for filmmakers is never work with animals or children. But in this particular production, the animals and the children were among the greatest creatures I've ever worked with in my entire life. The greatest challenge was that we were a very low budget, and as you see, we got tremendous production value because we were shooting in a foreign country, in Hungary. There were a lot of people who didn't speak English. Our Hungarian was almost nil, but it was physically challenging. That's what it really was. I never worked on anything that was this physically challenging. It was in the dead of winter. The place where the partisans lived, it was way down under near a pond, and I kept saying, where are the stairs? You know, how do I get down there? Where are the stairs? And they said, there are no stairs. You have to climb down and climb up, which I did, you know, many times during the day. And in the work camp, also where they worked, was underneath the ground. So it was snowing, it was freezing, there were animals, it was physically challenging, I must say. And we were working so fast, but sometimes challenges like that make you work harder and you get better results from them.
Was that your first time in Europe, Augie?
Yeah, it was. And it was, the city was spectacular. Budapest was beautiful, like all the landmarks and everything they had there. It was absolutely stunning. And I took so many pictures and everything. It was beautiful. It was my first time in Europe ever.
And I'm sure it helped you get a sense of the depth of the history, you know, the longevity of the Jewish people in Europe, and, you know, how many generations have preceded, you know, and consequentially been wiped out, by the Holocaust, and what a loss that was to the, the character, especially of Hungary and most of Eastern Europe. So
Okay.
let's talk a little bit about Caleb. How does the role of Caleb speak to the role of domestic animals in our lives? In other words, his relationship to giving you the faith and the courage, Joshua, the character, to persevere, and his, that bond. How is that reflected in general in people's relationships with their animals?
Well, I think the bond between human and animal, especially human beings and dogs, is so profound. People say that after they see the movie, they go home and they hug their animals for a couple of hours. But what's so interesting is that we're even realizing it now during the pandemic, that those animals are so important to us in so many ways. And that's why so many have been adopted during this time. These are special creatures. I mean, a friend of mine wrote a book called Dog is God Spelled Backwards. And I can understand why she wrote that book.
Yeah, I just went through separation with my pet dog, Ziggy, who I had for 18 years.
Oh my God.
And it was a very, very difficult transition to endure. And I just appreciate every moment, and how significant he was in my life.
So
why do you think people...
We'll dedicate this to Ziggy, okay?
Oh, that's so sweet.
Webinar.
Thank you. Yeah, he was my hiking buddy. He was a small min pin Chihuahua mix, but he could climb mountains. I mean, it was just remarkable what he adapted to my lifestyle. So why do people often have more empathy for animals than we do for each other? What do you think about that, Augie? That's a tough question, but I think it's true, right?
Mm-hmm. Like anytime I'm watching a movie and then like someone dies, I'm like sometimes I don't really cry, but when an animal dies, I'm like, oh my gosh.
It is so true. I mean, I will tell you a story. Augie, I think you remember this. We were having one of the Jewish film festivals. I think it might be the Los Angeles Jewish Film Festival. We were sitting in the back, and a man is sobbing and goes running out of the theater. And I felt compelled to go after him. And I said, are you all right? Are you okay? And he said, if anything happens to this dog, I will not be able to take it. I just won't be able to take it. And I said, you know what? Get some water and go back into the theater. Nothing is going to happen to the dog. And he said, how do you know that? I said, I know. You have to just trust me on this one. Go back in and watch the rest of the movie. And it's true. I mean, these animals just bring out a part of our heart that somehow we have trouble doing, interacting with other human beings. Actually, how many human beings do you know dance around with joy when they see you?
Yeah.
Right?
I personally think they're the most effective way of teaching us empathy.
Absolutely.
Because we have a natural empathetic response to them. Most people do. And by indulging that and then expounding on it, hopefully we can learn to be empathetic with each other as well. And that's the purpose of, telling the story of the Holocaust also. We have to teach people, teach each other, lift each other up to be more empathetic in order to, God willing, prevent, these types of atrocities and horrible chapters in human history to reoccur. I have a question about survivors, Lynn, for you.
Yes.
The few remaining survivors today were children in the Holocaust, like the character of Joshua. How do you think their experience differs from survivors who were adults during that time?
Well, there's a line in the movie where the partisan says to Joshua, with what this boy has seen, he is no longer a child. And I think that the survivors who were children at the time had no childhood. They went immediately to traumatized adults. So, I'm sure there are some stories where people were able to maintain something, but an experience like that, I think robs one of one's childhood completely.
And that there are more and more studies, and it's been in the news lately, how long-reaching and problematic childhood trauma is, especially when it's compounded, multiple ways. And survivors who were children, I think, from my experience, have been able to channel their experience into education and to dedicate their lives toward, teaching young people today. And that's so essential. And now we're at this point where they're transitioning and will no longer have the first witness testimony.
Absolutely.
And that's
you know what? It is our responsibility. Even we're the older generation now, and the generations to come, it's our responsibility. It's our duty. We have to do this. We have to. You've noticed that a lot of times children of survivors are very active in these movements.
Yeah, second generation, and then also non-Jewish young people, because they're dealing with issues of hate and intolerance. Do you friends talk about hate and intolerance, Augie?
They sometimes people are like rude to them and stuff, but all my friends and everyone are always so supportive of each other, and we always try to keep each other happy, and we all just want to be joyful and happy, and we don't care about the people who say bad things about us. We just stay happy no matter what happens to us, and no matter what we go through, we're just gonna stay happy.
So that courage and that conviction comes from the bond you have with your friends. You support each other in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
What did you ultimately learn from the experience of portraying Joshua? What would you say the biggest lessons were for you?
I learned a lot from the books, but like, oh my gosh, from the movie, like, it's like I actually lived it. And I can't imagine like how people felt like sleeping in those beds on top of each other and sleeping with random people they don't even know, and they're all dirty and they don't have any food and water. It's crazy. I like the movies and stuff really taught me a lot, but playing the part in the movie actually was a lot more about the Holocaust. I learned a lot more because I was pretending to be a part of it, and I learned a lot more.
I mean, one of the grave traumas of being in the concentration camps was the hunger.
Mm-hmm.
And now in America, people are experiencing the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mr.
So
Lerman in the movie. Mr. Lerman in the movie was like praying over 7 breadcrumbs because that was so much to him. And now we're eating all this stuff and we're taking it for granted. Like people who don't have any homes or food, and people from the Holocaust, they didn't have any food, and the stuff that we have nowadays we can take for granted easily.
I knew that Augie was a fantastic actor when he did the part of Joshua recreating a Seder in the forest.
Mm-hmm.
It was the middle of the night and it was freezing. We were exhausted. And I showed him pictures of his family, his movie family, the mother, his father, his sister. I showed him previous scenes we had shot. And he looked at them and I saw him take it in as he was really Joshua, as though he were really Joshua. He really became Joshua. And then that scene in the forest, when he makes that Seder out of whatever he can find, that's when I knew this child, this actor was something very special.
What do you think happened to Joshua after he got to Palestine, what do you imagine the rest of his life was like, Augie?
Well, I think maybe he got to Palestine and then he was with the dog and he was trying to find someone new. He was trying to start a new life, trying to find parents, and through thick and thin, he'd stay with the dog and the dog would help him stay happy. And just like how me and my friends support each other, like Joshua and Caleb would support each other and they'd stay happy and joyful until they found a family.
You just wrote the sequel.
Yes, I'm imagining the story myself. I mean, he would have been one of the pioneers and probably would have gone to a kibbutz and, learned to trade and told the remarkable story of his survival and become a teacher. Yeah, he had great promise ahead of him for certain. Lynn, how many Jewish film festivals has the film played in now? I know you're planning it to have a mainstream release once the pandemic passes, and that's your main goal. But you have shown in a few Jewish film festivals, and what's the response been like?
We've shown it at regular film festivals and Jewish film festivals. The number probably around a dozen.
And in your estimation, what role did Jewish film festivals play in our communities, and not just the Jewish community, but also in the broader community?
I think they play an incredibly important role. First of all, it's interesting how many Jewish film festivals there are. Yours is big compared to some of them, all over the country and all over the world. But they bring films to audiences that would never be seen. And they sponsor them and they're run so beautifully. Most Jewish film festivals are run better than the regular film festivals. So I think it's a great, great asset. And I think it's great that they've continued through virtual screenings throughout this time. They're incredibly important. Really, kudos to you and all of the people who do it.
Yeah, it's very fortunate that we've been able to pivot into, the online arena, and very successfully so, and that Zoom has come to our rescue to enable us to share and communicate, although everyone is of course very excited at the prospect of getting back to the live dynamic. I mean, it would be so nice to shake your hand, Augie, and congratulate you in person, and soon you'll be doing that, absolutely. So what are your long-term goals, Lynn, for the film? What in an ideal rollout, besides getting a lot of audiences, what do you hope for the film to achieve?
Here's the trajectory I would love to see. First, to play as many countries as possible. We are currently now in Brazil. We played the UK. We've been sold to about a dozen countries. We've also been sold to the Middle East, which makes me very happy. And then after that, I would love to have a healthy Canadian and US theatrical release. And after that, to go digitally on some of the platforms that are widely watched. And after that, to have this film be used as an educational tool for years and years to come, for an introduction to this time in history, to the Shoah, not for just Jewish children, but for children all over the world. That would be my dream.
That's a wonderful aspiration. I would like to see Augie get nominated for some significant recognition along the way, which I think is well deserved.
Absolutely.
And I think you have a pretty extraordinary, well-experienced distribution person in the wings that we both know.
Yes,
we do. Great asset. That would be Jeff Lipsky, who I believe is tuning in. So, hey, Jeff, thank you for helping this vehicle fulfill its promise. So let's see, we've got some Q&A. It's a little bit early to jump to it, but I think I'd like to get the audience involved, and then maybe we'll regroup and do some summary sharing. Neil, you want to jump in and read some of the questions?
Absolutely. So speaking about the sequel, Adrian did have a question, would like to know if you're going to film a sequel, and would like to know if Joshua and Caleb made it to Palestine.
Well, as Augie said, he does think that Caleb and Joshua made it to Palestine. And yes, I think they did. I think they did. We would love to do a sequel, but we would have to do it soon. Otherwise, it would be about Augie and his wife and family. And and so we would have to do it soon. But it seems like it would be great. It would be great.
Yeah, I guess if you were going to do a sequel pretty soon, Augie wouldn't be able to star in that film if he was going to be married with kids. Anyhow, we also have a question. I'm sorry, Josh, you had something you wanted to add?
I was just going to say son of Caleb, right?
Son of Caleb.
We have a question here from Francesca, who wants to know, how did August and Mauricio, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly, and his parents feel about him doing a naked scene, or was this a stand-in, and how cold was the water?
Oh, so it was a stand-in for the behind shot. It was a stand-in, but up close the water was pretty cold, but I got through, and I was pretending I had like a wetsuit like up to here, and the camera was right here, and then after that I like got on a towel and I was like and then the stand-in did his thing, and I think it turned out beautifully.
I guess anything for film, right? You got to do whatever it takes to make the film right.
Yeah.
Here's a question from Rhonda. What do you think is the youngest age appropriate for viewing, and why?
Well, Augie and I can confer about this. We usually say about 11, but I think, Augie, we did have younger people come to see it. Somebody was 9 that you brought, right?
Yeah.
Could he relate? Who was that?
My cousin Jackson. He was like 8 at the time. He loved the movie. I think the movie can be watched by almost everyone. It's great for all audiences.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I have a question from Deanna, and she mentions that she thought the movie was nicely done, and that the Holocaust was handled quite sensitively. She wished that the ending had shown them arriving in the Holy Land. Why did you end it in the boat?
A lot of people make this comment, but I decided to, and believe me, I wrote 3 or 4 different endings, but decided to go with this one because I didn't want to sew it up neatly. I didn't want, the happy ending was that Caleb and Joshua were together, that the dog jumped in the water, he made it safely to the boat, and the 2 of them were together. To show them arriving in Palestine at the time, just wrapped it up a little too neatly. So that's the decision I made. But if you're wondering and you want me to create an ending now, they made it. They were safe.
Great, that makes me feel better. Arlene has a question. So the movie was a canine Schindler's List. Who was the lead dog? There was no recognition in the credits to who the dog was. I understand that there were more than one dog that was in it, but is that a question you could answer for her?
Sure, we'll both answer it because we love to talk about it.
Yeah.
We actually had 5 dogs playing the hero role. We had one dog that was in the movie probably more than the others, and he is the one with the soulful eyes, with all the close-ups. But we needed to find a dog that could growl, a dog that could attack, a dog that could swim, a dog that could be cuddled. And we couldn't find that all in one dog. I wish I could do this with actors, and bring in this actor and that actor. So we would have to, we'd have to rotate dogs. And sometimes the dogs had moods just like people do. I could tell in the morning when a dog came on the set, I would say to the trainer, oh, I can see Stella is not in the mood to act today. So maybe we should keep, what was the other dog's name, Augie?
There's Betty, Eber, Jesse. Jesse was only used for the swimming part.
Right. I think maybe we should bring Eber in and have him. And then if you notice, there was a little marking on the dog here to give it a unique look. And so what we did is we made sure that any dog that was being filmed also had the marking. So the dog was in makeup for a little while.
That would be
Makeup? What?
That would be canine tuity, right?
Canine
tuity instead of continuity.
Oh, canine tuity. Sorry, I wasn't prepared for a pun all of a sudden.
I love that. I love the scene where Caleb is on his own, you know, that segment where he connects to the other dogs. Talk a little bit about that. How was that in the original novel? And
some of it was, yes. I mean, it was a real integration of the novel and some original things. But, you know, as a filmmaker, sometimes you have one moment that you want to make a film for that one moment. And this film had 3 moments for me. The first one was when the dog runs home and sits in front of his house. Now, I've learned a lot about the Holocaust. I come from a family that had a lot of family members who perished in the Holocaust. But when that dog sits in front of that house and looks up at that apartment, wondering where his family went, to me, that hit me harder than any other moment of coming back and finding that the people in the apartment are gone and other people are now living there. The second moment was when the dogs are fighting. They're in a dog fight, and the young boys, the Nazi youth, come and are beating up a little boy. And the dogs stop their fighting to watch real beasts, to watch real animals behave. So that was another moment. And the crew and the cast all knew that these were the important moments of the film. And third is kind of a controversial moment, which is when the dog cannot decide whether to go with Joshua or to stay with Ralph, where he sees that Ralph is wounded and he has allegiance to him. And that kind of love that a dog can feel, or loyalty, even with an evil person, this dog was able to tap in to some kind of inherent good in this person, was an interesting subject to explore. And so those were the moments of the film that the dog could lead us through.
Yeah, they were very, very, very powerful.
Yeah,
And I think you achieved them exquisitely in highlighting them.
It's a really interesting question. It's from an anonymous attendee, but was it true that during the Holocaust that Jews could not have pets?
When I read the book, I thought that the author had made this up. And I called him and I said, Asher, where did you get this? Are you telling me that the Jews could not have pets? And he actually sent me a duplication of the Nuremberg laws, where it was written that on X day, the Jews had to give up their pets. And every day these Nuremberg laws had another restriction. You couldn't have plants on your balcony. Then you couldn't go out on your balcony. Then you couldn't have dogs. It was unbelievable. And most people don't even know about this. So that was another reason to make this film.
Great. Our last question we have right now is for you, Augie, and I think it's a really interesting question. I'd love for you to hear what you have to say. It's from Lauralee, and she'd like to know if you have met a Holocaust survivor who was obviously a child in the Holocaust. Have you had that opportunity to meet a survivor?
Yes, at one of the film festivals. Afterward, one of the survivors of the Holocaust watched it, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you played the part perfectly!" Like, it just, and she was saying like all this stuff about like how the movie was just like how she remembers, like with how terrible it was. And we took pictures together, and I forgot her name sadly, but yeah, I did meet a Holocaust survivor, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah, those are amazing moments to relish, because it's going to, we're not going to have many survivors in the very, very near future. So if you have an opportunity to meet a survivor, again, relish those moments. So Josh, that's all the questions we have from our participants.
Okay, I'm going to just leave you both with any last words you'd like to share with our viewers before we preview our next coming film.
We want to thank you all for showing the film and for the response, the response that we've gotten. We're very appreciative of it. And when we do have our theatrical release, and then when we go digital, we hope that you will tell your friends and your family about the film so that they can see it also. But we do thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn.
If you guys enjoyed it, please go on to IMDb and give it a good rating, please. And spread the word about it, because most people don't even know about the Holocaust. So spread the word so more people can have awareness that this doesn't happen in the future. Nothing bad like this ever happens again.
And IMDb is the Independent Movie Database. Is that correct? In case you want to Google that and actually help give a bigger platform for this wonderful project. Okay, well, we're going to let you two go. Thank you so much for participating. Happy Hanukkah, and Merry Christmas coming to you, August, and all of us. And may this next year be a healthy one for the world, huh?
Absolutely.
Full of Tikkun Olam. Yeah.
Tikkun Olam, absolutely. Augie, great to see you.
Good to see you too.
Miss you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
So we're going to transition now to the upcoming film in July, which is called SNCC, pronounced SNCC.
I think you mean January.
Did I say July?
You did.
Oh my goodness. I must be really pushing ahead to the end of the pandemic in my imagination. So January, the new year, 2021. What are the dates, Neil, that we're going to be showing the film?
January 8th through the 12th.
Correct. And we're actually pre-recording the Zoom webinar with the director, filmmaker Danny Lyon, who is a very famous photographer who was one of the young activists in the civil rights movement who was recruited to document through photographs those important times in the South in the 60s. And this film is only played at a couple of major museums, the Whitney in New York, and it's quite a significant and important document about civil rights and social justice, and the role that young people played in promoting nonviolence protest and basically, you know, confronting the Jim Crow laws and successfully achieving, you know, recognition and greater liberty and justice for everyone that was involved. So let's run the trailer. And if you go to the web, okay, here we go. If you go to the Film Festival website, there's more information.
And you can tell every white man, every segregationist, every Ku Klux Klaner, that if they killed everybody in this house, there would be more Negroes to rise up, because the little children are singing now, freedom, freedom, freedom over me.
You were a revolutionary, right?
Well, I think all of us were, or at least we considered ourselves to be revolutionaries. We were change agents. We were people who wanted to make change and who did make change. We were a wonderful group of people. We did great stuff.
We are soldiers in the army. We have to fight, although we have to cry. We have to hold up the bloodstained banner. We've got
I think Foreman was really unusual in that he had this great appreciation for propaganda and for the historical record. Because he was older than we were, because he had been a graduate student, he'd been working on his doctorate, you know, he had a mindset toward making a record, preserving the record, and he thought about propaganda. He thought about press releases. He thought about mailing stuff out. He thought about creating a SNCC persona in the world, and you would be a natural for that.
But we told them about Greenwood and how the people were willing to go down to register and face the dogs. And some people said, well, if they can do that, then we can do this. And that's the way it goes, you see, all over the South.
Oh, Lord, I'm running for freedom. 99 won't do it. Oh, Lord, I'm running for freedom. 99 won't do it. Oh, Lord, I'm running for freedom. 99 won't do it. Oh, Lord, I'm running for freedom. 99 won't do it. I'm trying to make it through. Oh, no, big D really won't do it. 25. Oh, no.
How do you feel?
I feel okay.
You do?
Yeah.
I think you should look that way.
The air refreshing.
Yeah, it's good to get outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't remember the kind of dog you had?
Mm-mm.
I'm gonna call.
Oh, I know. It was the Irish setter.
That's a big dog, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it a puppy?
Oh, but he grew to a big dog. It was an Irish setter. It was a beautiful dog. It all came to me.
Where'd you get it?
There was a physician in Atlanta that had been raising Irish setters, and he gave us one. He's a very nice man, wonderful family.
I'm going to call this Two Old Guys in the Park.
It's okay.
It's a good film. Don't you think?
Yes, I think it is. It's good. Sit in the park.
Yeah.
And watch family members, including young members of the family and older members, sharing the outdoors.
Yeah, it's nice.
The wind is blowing like it's March.
Tell me about your mom.
Well, I grew up with my mother's brother and sister children. I grew up with a lot of first cousins, and we were like one big, happy family.
Okay. So I hope everyone can appreciate how important this documentation is. And Danny Lyon was close friends with John Lewis and had the exceptional opportunity to record him just months prior to his passing. And the contributions of these young people are very, very relevant to what's happening today. So thank you for tuning in next month. Thank you to Lynn and to Augie. Thank you to the JCC. Happy Hanukkah, everyone. And we're going to sign off. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Danica.
Thank you again, everybody.
Good night now.
Good night.